Hi, folks. Sorry, I'm moderating this and I was having trouble following my own instructions. But here we are. So just want to thank the four panelists in advance, and we'll just dive right in because we don't have a lot of time to have this conversation, but I know it's going to be really interesting. I will say what I'm going to do is, instead of me doing any kind of detailed introduction, I'm just going to start off by asking each of the four panelists to of course, introduce yourself, say who you are, your organization, but if you can also just speak to who the stakeholders are of that organization, like who do you who do you work with, who do you serve, and what matters to them. So this is just a very brief introduction just to get us started. So maybe Terry, I'll start with you if that's all right.
Sure. Yeah, Terry Rock, I'm the president and CEO of Platform Calgary. So we're building and opening a 50,000 square foot home for innovators in Calgary. So these are people who are tackling the toughest problems that we have, building businesses around them, social enterprises or social impact initiatives. And our job is really to empower them to make the biggest difference that they can make. And typically these would be entrepreneurs or founders of tech companies, but it's a big wide range. And so we're really looking forward to getting that open in the fall.
Okay, thanks, Terry. Alison, can I go to you next?
Sure, thanks, Chad. Good morning, everyone. I'm Alison Cretney, Managing Director of the Energy Futures Lab. So the Energy Futures Lab brings together an intentionally diverse cross-section of leaders and innovators from across the province's energy system, very broadly defined. So from community level to industry, government, various levels of leadership, Indigenous peoples, entrepreneurs. And I would say, this community is definitely forward thinking. So I think there's a lot of resonance with a lot of the ideas shared by the possibility panel. And certainly some of the things that are really top of mind around economy and diversification, truth and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples, stewarding kind of land, and then a lot of the more specific solutions that kind of show up around the energy and climate and economic sections of the report have a lot of resonance within the community I'm representing here today. Thanks, Chad.
Okay, thanks, Alison. Catherine, you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's Catherine O'Neill, joining you from Edmonton, Treaty 6 territory. It's great to be here this morning. I'm the CEO of YWCA Edmonton. We are one of the oldest and largest women's organizations in Edmonton. We've been around since 1907, so we've done a lot of work around gender equality. We have a wide range of services and programs, including counseling, youth leadership programs, etc. And we're part of a national and international movement to reach gender equality. And so I'm really excited to be here, because when I look at this possibility report, there's just so many things that I see crossing over and helping as far as that, all that. And previously, I was a journalist at the Globe and Mail, and I'm new to Alberta. I came, well, not newish, but 2004, and I came from Ontario. So it's really exciting to just see this conversation and being a part of it. So thanks, Chad.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. And Scott.
Thanks, and good morning, everybody. My name is Scott Crockett, and I'm Vice President with the Business Council of Alberta. The Business Council is a nonprofit, nonpartisan policy organization that works on policy that we say is designed to help economic and social prosperity. And to Chad's question about our sort of stakeholders, well, our members are the leaders, the CEOs or the presidents of 110 of the biggest organizations in the province, but really our stakeholder is Albertans. And so the filter that we try and run everything through is, will this make life better for Albertans generally, or won't it? And if it will, then that's where we push.
Okay, great. Thanks to all four of you. That gives us a sense of where our panelists are coming from. And the first thing we want to do is just ask each of you if you can share kind of overall high-level reactions about the report, and maybe anything in particular that resonated with you, any specific idea or any specific thought that resonated with you. And we are going to cover other questions too about maybe things you think might be missing or connections to what work that you're doing. But right off the top, just some reactions and maybe some ideas that particularly resonated with you. Scott, you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Chad. I love that question. So, to answer the first part of that, what particularly or what I thought of the overall report, as I was reading it, I just loved the approach that it took, and I love the approach that Next 30 has been taking in general. This sort of non-antagonistic space where we can talk about ideas, and I love how this report showed it. My cat has decided he wants to participate in this session as well, by the way. But I love how Next 30 has been approaching ideas with the kind of thought that disagreement is fine, and we don't have to love every idea that's taking place. In fact, the people who think differently than us in this province have probably arrived at their thinking through really rational means, and by understanding their points of view better, we can all come to a better place. And I felt like the whole report was sort of infused by that idea of sort of pushing down polarization versus firing it up. And there's a dozen ideas that I could say resonated with me, but I'll tell you the one that I told myself I wanted to speak to the most. It's actually about childcare, affordable childcare. I think that over the course of the pandemic, it has really spotlighted how childcare is an economic issue as well as a social issue. But frankly, I think we should be talking about it as an economic issue first now. And I like to think that when we have high quality, affordable, and accessible childcare, that there are at least three people who win. You know, there's the parent who wins because they can more fully participate in society. There's the employer who wins because they get a high quality person working at their place of employment. And the kid wins too, because there's good research to show that early childhood education is really important for development. So I think that investing in early childhood education, investing in childcare is a bit of a no-brainer. And the one extra piece that I put to that is I see that as part of a broader idea of full economic participation. I think the best economic stimulus that we can possibly have is to allow everyone in our society to contribute fully of their talents in the way that they want to. And I think that begins with parents of young children as one place, also new Canadians, also Indigenous people, and we need to be thinking about all the ways that we can sort of include in folks who aren't fully participating in society and the economy and knock down those barriers.
Great, thanks, Scott. Catherine, you want to go next?
And I want to jump right in and say to Scott that I'm with him. Childcare is an economic issue, and I think what this pandemic has shown is how important it is to have a healthy, thriving childcare ecosystem. So that we're finally putting a spotlight on this is so essential, because we have seen in this pandemic that a lot of women have voluntarily or involuntarily left the workforce, and we've lost huge gains that we've made in the last few decades as far as women's participation in the workforce. So it's really important that we put our mind to this. But I think we need to go a step further. I think, it's $20 per day childcare. I think we need to just look at the entire ecosystem and really figure out what childcare will look like post-pandemic. There's going to be a lot of hybrid workplaces. What does that mean for childcare facilities? How do we keep childcare accessible and affordable, not just in the cities, but in rural Alberta and smaller communities? Because there's different needs, and it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of decision. And why this is so crucial is that we have the youngest province in our country. And there's a lot of other provinces that are putting their mind to this. If we look next door to BC, BC is busy creating a whole childcare strategy. And if we just don't get to work and really figure out what's next for Alberta and be very innovative and really think outside of the box, we could see a lot of our young folks just saying, Alberta's not a place to live and work, and I'm going to move, next door where I can have a young family and I'm supported. So this is an urgent issue in our mind, and not only YWCA Edmonton, but all of the YWs in Alberta had put our minds to this. So it's really exciting that it's in this report.
Okay, thanks, Catherine. That's interesting that there's some alignment already between the two of you on your favorite, or one of the ones that's most compelling. I found it interesting that one is actually appears in the talent section, because you're right, it could appear in lots of different themes, economy and social and so on, but that angle about it being related to our ability to attract and retain people is an interesting one. Alison, I'm going to go to you next, and I'm going to see if you have one other than childcare to speak to, and just overall.
Yes. Thank you. I think so. I'm actually going to cheat a bit and just and talk about two. So one, the ideas around truth and reconciliation really resonated with me. It's solving systemic racism and inequities in our society is something like we all have a responsibility to contribute to. And as Tim so eloquently pointed out this morning, it's not an Indigenous challenge, it's a responsibility of settlers. And I think that, and then the ideas that followed in the report, I think really are important and absolutely crucial. We do not get to the future that we're talking about that is inclusive and that works for everyone without each of us reckoning with that on a personal level. So I wanted to put my support behind those, as well as I work in the energy and climate space. And there was a number of pieces that really resonate. And actually, the Energy Futures Lab has nurtured some of these as well. But I really like the ambition of it was in the section around economic diversification and talking about bitumen beyond combustion. But essentially this, and I found there was a thread throughout the report of truly building from our strengths, like what in Alberta can we be uniquely good at, and the kind of drop the hammer challenge of, we risked 1.3 billion on a pipeline. What would it look like to invest that in some of these transformative opportunities that transform the resources and the skills that we have? And so, bitumen beyond combustion, Auster 2.0, I think were examples of those.
Okay, thanks, Alison. Terry, do you want to build from that on building from our strengths?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's interesting. There's a talent section, but the whole report is about talent in my mind. The whole report is what is going to make this a place where people that want to make a dent in the universe call their home. And that's actually, so I'm going to go to the license plate one, not because I think it's about the license plate, but it's actually about the story we're telling ourselves about ourselves. And why Alberta? Because if one of the things that I looked for and that resonated with me in the report thematically was the recommendations, the ideas that were generative, that were going to, they weren't sort of picking a thing that we're going to do and then that's, okay, check, that's done. But they were setting in motion changes in framework, changes in mindset that were going to last and have ripple effects really into the long run. Because I don't think people, when you're talking about attracting talent, there's kind of two ways you can go. One is it's about you. You can come here and you can build your life. And to me, that's limiting. I think it's, you can come here and be part of something that's going to matter for decades in history. Whether that is living in right relation as something that we figured that out and we became the place that did that, or the world's sustainable energy problem was something that was tackled here because we needed the talent to do that. I think that's what people are looking for in a workplace, and they're looking for in a place to live. And I think we're sort of on our back foot right now, where a lot of our policy thinking is defense, and we need to be thinking way more about possibility. So that's what resonated with me on the report.
And Terry, I'll just ask you to follow that up. What does it look like to shift from defense to offense? Like what are some examples in your mind of
yeah, well, so
shift?
we talked, there's a couple of key points in there about, for example, a protein supercluster, about the impact on sort of economic activity of being a net zero place, for example. Both of those are two good examples. If we come at, say, a protein supercluster as a way to create new jobs, that's kind of defensive. It's like we're filling a gap, versus we're a place that already feeds the world. Like the world depends on Alberta's agriculture, and you get to be part of that. And so we're not only creating new technologies and building these things, but we're doing it because we uniquely can feed more people, make them healthier. In clean tech, it's like we're trying to, one way to look at clean tech is it's a way to clean up our industry right now so we can maintain what we have. Another way to look at it is the world has a sustainable energy problem, and we have the people here that forget about what we have now, but into the future can actually create technologies and businesses that solve that problem for people all over the world. So that to me is the difference between, like, it's the why, what's actually driving this. And I know I live in a place that has the people that can do that if we get them thinking the right way.
We've talked about innovation in the tech and the economic sense, and I know I've heard you speak about innovation in social delivery of social service and social innovation as well.
Yeah, and I missed the first half of my audio cut out, but yeah, I think I love what Terry just said about not just being on the defensive, being on the offensive. And I think within the social sector, we've gotten into a mindset of really just being in the weeds and just treating the problem and not solving the challenges. And that's what brought me to the why. I think it's been innovative throughout its history. And I think we need to step up in this time and help not only our politicians, but our businesses, our community leaders, help come up with really good solutions. And in our area, it's about gender equality and what's the roadmap there. But I think all of the social sector needs to look post-pandemic and say, what are we doing to help solve these challenges? And that's what I love about Alberta, is that you really can bring minds together and get these things done. But you have to have that mindset that you can solve this, that these aren't things that are just forever. Because I think, for a lot of people think gender equity, we're never going to reach it. But if you think like that, you're never going to reach it. So I come in going, okay, we're going to, in my lifetime, reach gender equality, particularly at political representation or within our boardrooms. That has to happen to have true gender equality. So it's really exciting time. And I think it needs to be part of the whole overall conversation, because it comes back to that quality of life, that livability. Why would people live here? And so if you can come here and solve big challenges and be part of an amazing community, that's going to make Alberta, bring our mojo back.
Okay. That could be the subtext maybe to the bring our mojo back. Great. Well, let's just turn to what we might do, or I guess maybe I'll say what connections do you see among the ideas here to things that are already happening? Because I think that's part of this is there's new ideas in here, but there are also some here where there's either they might have already there might be efforts that have already started, or there might be some connection to things that are happening in your own organizations and networks. Now you've spoken to a few of those, but Scott, maybe I'll go to you. Are there any here that you see where it connects to stuff that's already happening, for example, with the Business Council or the broader business community?
Oh, absolutely. And, the one I'd like to pick up on is energy. Energy is a huge part of the conversation in Alberta, and where we go with the energy sector, the energy transition in a low carbon future, it is core to where this province goes. It's not the only thing by any stretch, but it's important. And when I look at the whole energy section, I think that it can all be summed up in something that I think was in the preamble about sort of turning risk to opportunity and succeeding not in spite of our natural resources in a low carbon future, but because of our natural resources. And so there's a series of ideas in there, all of which were good, some of which are new. But I think that one thing we have to realize is that actually a ton is happening in the energy. I call it the energy evolution space. I think that's what we're actually going through right now. Alberta is a world leader in terms of carbon capture, utilization, and storage, hydrogen production. There's exciting technology on the horizon in terms of direct air capture and even nuclear fission and things like that. And I see a ton happening in this space. And I think you could really say that the moment of the 5 big oil sands companies committing to a net zero future is a catalyzing moment. It actually turns, to several of my other panelists' point, it turns us from defense to offense. And I don't mean offense in like an aggressive fight way. I mean in a like forward leaning, here's what we're gonna do. We're headed this way. How do you want to be on board with that? And it totally changes that conversation from us just sort of being pulled along to meet the next target, instead saying, we're going to jump out in front. And in fact, I think that'll put some pressure on some other industries that produce a lot of carbon to say, are you being this bold? Do you have a plan that looks like this? So that's an area where I think we're really beginning to move forward.
Okay, thanks, Scott. Well, Alison, I'll go to you because there's a nice bridge from what Scott just said to the work that you do with the Energy Futures Lab. And I mean, you've been working in that space that Scott just described for several years. So how, just to his point about maybe how the landscape is different now compared to how it was on that particular topic in Alberta, even 3-4 years ago. Can you just speak a little bit about that, how you see that?
Yeah, thank you, Chad. Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, within the Energy Futures Lab, we've been nurturing sort of a portfolio. We take a portfolio approach, and we've been kind of nurturing a whole portfolio of what we see as solutions for the energy evolution or energy transition or transformation, whatever we want to call it. And I absolutely have felt and seen a sea change, I think in particular in the last 18 months. Moving, it's really a sense of this, portfolio really feeling like it's sort of like fringe and, kind of get a little sort of pat on the head and yeah, maybe someday, to so many of these opportunities really genuinely landing in more mainstream. So what I mean by that is landing in some government priorities like hydrogen, for example, and geothermal and carbon capture, utilization and storage. We're seeing a bigger commitment there, but at the provincial and federal levels, for example. Significant corporate commitments and announcements of projects. So, really investments starting to happen. And so I think, I feel there's incredible momentum here. And I feel a lot of hope and encouragement because of that. I think the one thing I'll maybe add, kind of picking up on some points that Terry and Scott made earlier, is, and in relation to, it's not like this is a story of opportunity. And I think, we see very clearly where the world is headed from a emissions and climate perspective. And I think there's still in this sense, often of that being a fearful place for Alberta and something we have to potentially kind of shrink from, when really leaning into that. And I love that the section in the report that talked about a bold, ambitious public emissions target, because I really feel the importance of us signaling that, yes, we are on board with this, and it's a huge opportunity, genuine opportunity for us, because in the areas of carbon capture and hydrogen and alternative uses for bitumen that really do have a place in a low emissions future, we have all we need there. We just need the level. We need to make the big bets now. We need to get more aligned, and I'm really encouraged because we're seeing that growing alignment. And at the same time, let's continue to pick up the pace on that.
Okay, thanks. I'm just reminded that I was supposed to remind all of you participants to submit questions if you have them. So if you I see some people are putting great comments in the chat box. You can continue to do that. There's also on slido.com at #next30, you can find this session and you can pose questions there. So I'll monitor both in case you have any questions. But in the meanwhile, I'm just going to keep going with my questions. And Terry, we spoke, I guess it was only yesterday, just in reviewing this, and you mentioned some areas where you felt like maybe it could be emphasized a bit more in terms of the report, and the opportunity to seize some of that possibility that's described there. So I'd love to have you kind of put those into the mix in the conversation here too.
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts with Scott talked about sort of inclusion and economic opportunity. But I just, I have to be a believer in the world-changing power of entrepreneurship, not in the big capital E sense, but throughout, and how we can create a policy environment that really takes advantage of sort of a natural state of desire to do that in Alberta. In the US, there's a program called Right to Start that I would really, like people to take a look at, that prescribes policy, a set of policies that can really make it so that entrepreneurship is inclusive. France has an approach that they call replicating privilege. So if I wanted to start a company and go assemble capital, like I have the means to do that. But a lot of people come from backgrounds where that's not possible. How do we create a system so that your privilege doesn't stop you from taking advantage, sort of taking your own economic resilience as your own responsibility, and then sort of creating a community that supports that. It speaks more broadly, I think, to sort of a thread in the document around innovation. This notion of a pre-permitted innovation zone was proposed for the protein industry. And why wouldn't we just talk about innovation as pre-permitted as part of the bargain of being in Alberta? And, you know, we did that in protein, but in the healthcare one, it was a task force. And like, come on, a task force as the idea? No, in healthcare in Alberta, let's frame up this opportunity. We have the largest single administration of patients, patient data in the world. The Alberta Health Services is one of the, I think it's the biggest sort of single entity in terms of patients. So now you have like a great place to build solutions, again, that can change people's health outcomes all around the world by being a place that prioritizes innovation in there. My spouse works in healthcare on innovation around blood conservation. And she, in a period of about 5 years, saved about $30 million a year in blood and made every patient that she touched healthier by implementing innovation around how we prepare people for surgery and use blood and things like that. These are all like just all happening in Alberta right now. And when I look at the broader, you know, that sort of notion of how we're going to unlock this, my colleagues in Edmonton, Innovate Edmonton and Platform Calgary, have teamed up to work with agencies across the province to create a funnel opportunity for anybody that wants to start a tech-enabled or innovation-driven enterprise or initiative is now going to have a very clear pathway with support all along. And we're just in the process of realigning that. So I think we've kind of got the message through Alberta Innovates, through the government of Alberta, that things are happening, and it's going to be a way that we get out of where we're at. And I feel like we need to get that just more, like if we imagine if you had that going on and then you implemented like right to start legislation that said, we're going to just get rid of all of the barriers and support people who don't have pre-built privileges to do it. So.
Okay, thanks, Terry. Lots there. There's lots of comments in the chat box here, so I'm just going to highlight one question from Ryan that's actually posed as a question. How do we disseminate and share the success in university endeavors and bring it into industry? And he cites an example there. So I don't know, Scott, if you have a response to that, or any panelists really want to jump in.
Well, and I noticed Catherine nodding along. You go first, Catherine, please.
Well, I really would love to hear your answer too, but I look at that from like, I look at AI, and one of the things that we've really talked about within the, at the YW is how do we get more women and girls into STEM? And so there's a lot, there's so many untapped workforces that we have in our province. And so we are doing a lot of work about how do we bring more folks into these spaces and training up and training and development awareness, because we don't have the workforce that we need particularly when it comes to AI and STEM jobs within our own province. And so that work needs to start today, that if we're ever going to be successful with these new kind of economies of the future. And so that's something that we really are putting a lot of thought to. But over to Scott, because when it comes to that connection between university and industry, there's so much work that needs to be done. And I think we haven't put enough thought into what the strategy is, not just today, but in 30 years.
I think it's a wonderful topic area for discussion. To be frank, I think we've been bad at it, at moving innovation off the lab bench and into the real world, at taking advantage of some of the fantastic brains that we have in academia. But that doesn't mean we have to keep being bad at it. And there are certainly pockets of good, but we have incredible resources in this province. I notice in the chat there's some people talking about AI. You know, the U of A in particular being one of, it's been ranked in the top 3 places on Earth for artificial intelligence. We have a booming tech sector that's just crying for talented people to come out of our universities at all kinds of levels. I think, you know, if I was to put it in a word, what I think we need is ambition in this area. And we just need to be, you know, not increasing our amount of focus by a little bit in those areas. Like we need to be like 10xing it in terms of how we can just pump some energy into areas like AI in universities.
Can I jump in on that? Because I think there's really something for people to understand about that, what the potential of that is. The best places in the world, the best economies in the world, cities in the world, get about 20% of their the sort of growth and jobs out of university-based education or innovation, out of the lab. 20% is the best you can get. I mean, I'm assuming unless we're the best, like better than the best. So what about the other 80%? And how does that actually happen? And so what's really interesting is when we look at the U of A legitimately has a high, very, very high concentration of the smartest people in the world in artificial intelligence. And with less concentration of people, Toronto and Montreal are creating not just like a couple more companies, they're creating 10 to 20 times the number of commercialization efforts from their talent base. What is going on there? And what's really interesting is that most of it is the fact that one's in Edmonton and one's in Calgary. And the collision of business problems and super talented people that is mostly organic is not happening at the rate it should. So you guys talked about high-speed rail, I think in the report. Maybe I was reading a platform from somebody who's running for office.
Yeah, but I don't think I was in the report.
So, but this is the kind of thing where there's a bit of physics involved here, like economies of scale of people coming together is part of the story. So that's one of the reasons why the Platform Innovation Center is intending to sort of pull that stuff together, because we just think there's a benefit from it. But there's absolutely huge opportunity out of artificial intelligence here. Again, there's actually work being done there. I would expect some accelerators that are sort of global in scale to arrive in Alberta in the next 6 to 8 months. The government of Alberta is putting together a panel on how they can putting together a strategy on how they're going to use artificial intelligence. And there's a whole other thing about the social implications of the job destruction of automation and AI that the report also talks about, which I think is also part of this too.
Okay, thanks, folks. Unfortunately, we're going to have to wrap this because we're going to get booted out of this breakout room in a couple minutes here. It's amazing how quickly 40 minutes can go by. I will say there were a few comments in there, questions about what about education, for example, and other ideas. And the good thing is, and we'll say this more in the larger group, this really report was really meant to be a conversation starter, as has been said a few times. And so the website, thenext30.ca, now has a space where people can submit their own ideas and topics about Alberta's future as well. So definitely a space for you to contribute some of your ideas as well. So I just want to thank all the panelists here. This has been a really good discussion, and it certainly you know, I think gives us that whole shift from defense to offense, you know, in the sort of spirit of opportunity and possibility, I think is a really big theme coming out of this. And I'll be taking that forward, and just want to thank you for also giving us a sense that some of these ideas might actually have some legs. So appreciate that. And we'll go back to the big room. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.